There is a saying that goes that rules are meant to be broken. And if we think about it, this might be true. There are many reasons why one would choose to go against the written directions. An expression of individuality, of rebellion, to fix a broken system. No matter why, we are encouraged to think critically. And if we see that the rules are not working out, we should go for it, break them, make it count. But what about the rules that are not meant to be broken? What about the rules that even children do their best to follow? What makes everyone so terrified and yet fascinated with that? Welcome everyone to my attic. My name is December, and tonight we're not talking about books. Tonight we're going to talk about a rather fascinating and, at least in my opinion, really interesting phenomena in the niche of short horror stories which can be found online. Okay, so what am I actually talking about? Let's start from the current moment, then go back in time, and then travel all the way back to right now. And by right now I mean 2 hours ago. So there's a very interesting, again, phenomenon in the short horror story creation scene right now. And it has been going on for quite a while, at least for a few years. I would say it can be observed for the last 3 years. And what this means is horror stories that actively feature a list of rules. For one reason or another, the horror story actually has a list of rules which were given to the narrator for, again, one reason or another, that they're not supposed to break. And this isn't, again, it's not a new idea, and yet it is odd because it is becoming really widespread in all of the subgenres of short horror and in short online horror. Nothing like novels or anything like this. I'm not going to go to this creepypasta because I believe that term is a bit outdated now, and it is linked to a different type and a different format and different group of stories. So I'm just going to refer to it as short horror. And those lists of rules are rules for survival, and they are becoming, again, really popular, currently hitting in the hundreds, thousands of stories online. And I just find this so interesting, mostly because this is a format which can be found in every subgenre of short online horror. And yet, when you look at the stories, it is so glaringly obvious that this format has been used that it's almost like the story is a list of rules first and everything else second. But let's go back, all the way back, and try to figure out, how did we get to this point? What happened? Where did this come from? Now, seances have never been anything new as far as I can remember, going back. And obviously they were new at some point, but long before short horror and online horror existed, we already had the list of rules, just not in the format which we see today or the format which I'm talking about tonight. If you think all the way back to Ouija boards and sitting in a circle summoning Bloody Mary, summoning the Queen of Spades, summoning the Candyman. If you think about it, those were the first lists of rules linked to horror which we had. But also, those were the first lists of rules which the participants were strictly encouraged to only follow, not to break. Because if you think of any type of storytelling, usually if a list of rules are introduced, like some kind of a legal system, or some kind of the status quo. The main characters are encouraged to break this, to destroy the system. And yet, when we think about the seances, when we think about sitting in a circle at midnight chanting Bloody Mary's name, all we know is we should follow the rules. Really, really rarely you're going to find stories as to what happens if you don't follow the rules. I do know there's a few possible outcomes, but that's the major point. This is something that, whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, it is directed at children. It is directed at really, really young children, and I believe the youngest I have seen in my experience go back to 7, 8-year-olds, even at sleepovers, birthdays, etc., who are just trying to spook themselves or try to spook each other. And again, and yet, those children that can be so young and usually would try to be mischievous and try to break the rules they know of just to see what happens, would quite often do their best to follow those rules, even if there is no actual clear indication about what would happen if they don't. And also something that's very, very interesting about this timeline and this part of horror history is that those rules, they were contradictory. What does this mean? I'm going to speak about the things which I have heard, the things which I have seen, and actually, you know what, for this one, because from what I know, all those rituals go the same way, you're just chanting a different spirit or a demon's name. So instead of showing you a list of all the beings which you can summon like this, I'm just going to show you a list of the contradiction of those rules. Let me just, okay, so first of all, I'm going to just move a bit to the side, and just not trip on something, yes, here, and then we are going to take out the the whiteboard. So let's count all the different versions of those rules which I have heard, and feel free to add any others which you know of. Whether you're going to summon Bloody Mary, the Queen of Spades, Candyman, a few others which are a bit more strange, if I may say so, you would need, first of all, you would need one person, 3 people, an even number of people, or an odd number of people, because there has to be one leader and then an even number of people. For the summoning, you would need a bathroom mirror, a small mirror, a big mirror you can put in the middle of the room, or no mirror at all. You might need complete darkness. You might need a candle. You might need multiple candles. You might need something that's shaped as a skull, or you might not. I actually believe the only time I have heard the skull thing was when I observed some individuals trying to do a summoning of the Queen of Spades, and I think the only reason someone mentioned the skull was because there was a skull-shaped mug in the room, so they just kind of wanted to use it for the ritual. But even then, you might need an Ouija board, a piece of paper, a pencil, a deck of cards. You might need lipstick, perfume, deodorant, or none of those. Water, maybe. You would need to be standing in front of the mirror. You might need to be sitting on the floor. You might need to close your eyes. You might need to open your eyes. You might need to do it at midnight. You might be able to do it at any point between sunset and sunrise. You might need to do it at 3 in the morning. Now, as you can see, if you ask anyone what's the best way to summon the Bloody Mary, even if they don't believe in the occult, or if they don't think this is something that happens, or this is not something they want to participate in, they're going to give you some sort of a mix of all those, and probably about a dozen more which I haven't heard of or I can't remember. So as you can see, there is no single list of rules to summon the Queen of Spades, to summon Candyman, to summon the Joker, and I don't mean the supervillain Joker. I mean when you have a deck of cards and you have the Joker and the Queen of Spades and all the others, yeah, that Joker. And also, there is no guarantee what the results, what would happen if you don't follow the rules. I have heard about instant death, explosions, disfigurement, all those things, everything basically. Okay, that wasn't funny. You didn't see that. Anyway, so it all began all the way back when children did their best to follow those rules. I believe the only thing which I know people actively broke, and this wasn't because they were trying to get their eyeballs, removed. It's more of kids being afraid. Was one of the versions requires multiple people to close their eyes and chant, and the easily spooked individuals just kept their eyes open because they were afraid of what would happen. Same thing as when you wash your hair in the shower and you don't want to close your eyes because when you open them there might be like a demon in front of you. I hope it's not just me. But so in this case, it all began with lists of rules which would allow us, or allow you. I don't want any part of this. I take no participation in such rituals because I do have some sense of self-preservation. But to those of you who are willing to try, the reward for following all those rules is knowing that you outsmarted a demon or a spirit, is some extra knowledge, because in some of the versions, if you summon the Queen of Spades and you do the ritual correctly, or if you use a Ouija board and you summon a demon or the spirit of a dead person, you can get extra information. They're going to answer questions because they have to. You might get some extra information, you might get the knowledge that you outsmarted a demon, or you might just have a fun birthday party. But the thing is, those were the rewards. So having the occult, having some higher power bow down to you and admit that you're its master. So this is how it all began. And I remember this was already popular 20 years ago. So it's not new, it's not something original. People have been doing those for hundreds of years. People have been breaking rules since rules existed. But people have been writing this type of stories, even if it's not technically a written story, for, again, decades, centuries. So what happened then, people to move on from this? Well, first of all, the internet. Stories became more popular in stories form, and this was the link between the how to say it best. Okay, let me just remove the whiteboard, because we are going to need it later. We are going to need to wipe it off. So okay, remove it, and I'm going to go back to the center of the room. There we go. So the link between those original seances and what caught my eye really, really recent, well, not recently, but what kept catching my eye for quite a long time is actually the middle ground. It is a list of rules, it is a ritual, And it is a ritual that's going to give the participant some type of power over the occult. But now, the rules are no longer mixed up. The rules are no longer contradictory. And the rules are no longer obscure or something someone heard somewhere. When trying to summon the Bloody Mary, or the Queen of Spades, the people present would just toss everything they know and kind of agree to a mix of all of those, and then follow this and hope they don't, again, lose their eyeballs. It happens, it happens, it happens. But for the next stage of this process, of this evolution of horror, the rules were very, very specific, and so are the rituals. Now I'm going to list a few, and actually, you know what? We're going to take out the whiteboard again and just move here. Try not to trip on anything. Okay, and whiteboard, poof, there it is. And I'm going to list a few, and you're going to you know about those. The Midnight Game, One Man Hide and Seek, the Elevator Game, and I'm going to mention something about this one a bit later. The Bathtub Game, A Taxi to Another World, A Phone to Another World. Now, I can guarantee anyone interested in horror has heard at least a few of those. And a few of those actually had some kind of media created based on them. I do know that the Midnight Game has an actual indie horror video game based on it, which is quite interesting. I personally haven't played it, but I do know some people who have. And it is a shorter to experience. It does look quite interesting. It does follow the ritual. So what are all of those? Those are the next step after the people who were summoning Bloody Mary grew up and also discovered the internet. If you Google all of those, oh, also Three Kings. The Three Kings is a very interesting one. Remind me to talk about it a bit later. So, if you Google all of those, or any of them, the instructions which you're going to see, because they do come only as list of instructions. Now, those are still not stories. They're base for a story. So the horror story would be the supposed personal narration of someone attempting those, but by themselves, those are still not stories. And they're also, this is very important, they do not try to be. They do not pretend to be stories. Those are just rules, instructions, things you're supposed to do so you don't die, or worse. But what are those? What is the Midnight Game? What is One Man Hide and Seek? What are the Three Kings? What is the Elevator Game? All of those, if you Google them again, you're going to get the same list of instructions, and I mean the same. And I mean copy-pasted the same. But this means that we as horror enthusiasts have moved on from the scrambled mishmash of rules where we try to summon demons and hope for the best. And now we have a united system where we all, when we try to do it, or again, when you try to do it, I don't. No. I have enough dealings with demons, even without that. So when you try to do it, if you're all going to do the same thing. No matter how many of you try to do the elevator game, you're going to do it the same way. You're going to attempt to do it the same way. No matter how many of you try the one man hide and seek, you're all going to try to do it the same way. I do not recommend it, but I know some of you are there. I know some of you have no sense of self-preservation. I see you, literally. And again, this is already a progress because you're no longer trying to remember what it was. People who attempt this, and I know most people who write those stories, those are just pieces of creative writing, okay? Those are not real. But I do know some people are curious. Some people do try those. I'm not saying any of the supposed recollections online are or are not people actually trying to do those. I'm just saying some of them are pieces of creative writing, and I am also saying there are people who would actually attempt those in real life, even if they don't believe it, especially if they don't believe in it. Because when you don't believe in something, what's going to happen? Nothing. You know, what's a god to a non-believer? But those rules have also evolved because again, they're very uniform. They're very strict. They're always the same. They also feature punishment. Instead of some vague idea that you might be possessed, maybe, you might unlock a gateway for hundreds of thousands of ghosts or demons, both, Satan, who knows, to come into our world. You might lose your face, literally, or you might just die, who knows. Now, with those rules, you have a very strict idea what's going to happen if you don't follow them. Especially, and even if we don't look at the pieces of creative writing that are based on them, quite a lot of those include warnings like if you don't dispose of your materials properly, this is going to happen. If you misclick on a button in the elevator, this is going to happen. If you open your eyes before your time in the taxi through hell runs out, this is what's going to happen. So this makes more sense that people wouldn't want to break those because, again, we do have the instructions and we also have the punishment. We have the carrot, we have the stick. What's it going to be? And those are quite popular for quite a while. Again, one of those that is a bit different, and I just want to mention it because I do consider it to be a very interesting piece, is the Three Kings, which is not meant to summon anything. It is supposed to be a ritual that unlocks your ability to kind of see the different parts of yourself and communicate with them and have a conversation, honest conversation with the angel and the devil on your shoulders, which are actually both yourself. Again, I do not recommend, don't try any of those in person. Even if you're a non-believer, even if you're strictly very grounded in reality, just don't. It's not worth it. You're either not going to get any of it or you're going to get negative consequences. Either way, not worth it. But the Three Kings is the one that is a bit more complicated as to what exactly happens. It is considered to be just you talking to the different sides of yourself, which I think might end up actually being worse than ghosts. And also another one which got quite popular, I believe the proper word in your language is infamous, right? Famous in a very negative light, or more like people actually started talking about it a few years ago when there was an accident in Las Vegas with a young lady named Elisa Lam. I am not going to say anything more because it is a tragic accident, and for some reason, once additional information was released about what happened, people for some reason attributed what happened to the elevator game, which supposedly allows you, if you follow a very strict list of instructions, again, instructions, rules, all those things, to actually walk through hell and go back unscathed. And for some reason, quite a lot of people online turned this very, very real tragedy into saying that this individual, this woman, tried to do this and didn't do it right, and that's why the tragedy happened. I would like to discourage this. Don't try to link real life cases like this to the occult. It's not good. It's disrespectful. It's not cool. So this is stage 2 of the strange development, the strange fascination with rules. We have much stricter rules. They're actually written down. They're still not actual pieces of storytelling. Are they creative writing? Yes. I do believe all of those are some type of creative writing, and a few of them just were a bit more popular, right place, right time, so they managed to establish themselves. When it comes to one-man hide and seek, which is one of those which you can see on the site, it's been mentioned that it's a really ancient, old Japanese ritual. Quite a lot of those are supposed to be that, just because Western cultures sometimes like to attribute quite a lot of horror subgenres and genres to Japan. Just they're all just creative writing people at best. At worst, it's definitely not something you want to mess with. But again, it's just a case of being the right place, the right time. I'm sure that if you actually dig around, you can find many more who popped up around the same time, but those are the ones that managed to establish themselves. And what is shared between those is, again, you are strictly encouraged to follow the rules. No, you're not encouraged to follow the rules. You are told you have to do it or else. And the or else is not fun at all. It's horrible. And people who attempt those, because I know you're there again, I know I have seen humanity, been disappointed, but I've seen it. People who try those do not break those rules on purpose. They do their best to follow them, and if something happens, it is negligence, it is an accident. It's not them going, oh, I wonder what's going to happen if, instead of following all the strict rules, I try to talk to the demon in the elevator or something like this. People try to follow those rules, which again, it is kind of odd, because if you have managed to get to the point where you're in a taxi or in a cab or in an elevator in a different world, you would think you would want to explore it, and yet people don't. They follow they set up their clocks, they set up their alarms, and they follow them strictly because the stick, the or else. It is kind of odd, don't you think? We've been trying to make the occult submit to us for centuries, millennia, and some of us just gave up, and then things happened. Well, some of you are still trying, and yet you try to do it while still following the rules, because if you follow all those rules, you are going to get the occult to submit to your will. If you play the midnight game, you're going to outsmart a demon. If you play one-man hide and seek, you're going to outsmart a demon. If you play the elevator game or call a taxi to a different world, you are going to go into different places, different dimensions, different planes of existence. You're going to outsmart the occult. You're going to make it submit to your will. It will not be able to harm you. even though it's going to want to. That's why I'm telling you not to do it. So it is the same premise, isn't it? Trying to make the account to submit to your will. And yet, never to go to color outside of the lines, never to go out of bounds, always follow the rules. Those were actually quite popular again a few years ago, and it is very, very interesting how some of those have ingrained themselves into the memory of people who were online around that point. Because if you check with younger people who either joined the online communities after this or were too young then and just didn't encounter them, they might not even know what those are. But people who were into horror around that time, all of them know about those. All of them know about all of those. And yet, those were still not where we are today. First of all, because those were the rules, do this, don't do this. They were also lists of steps to follow. First, you do this, then you do this, and then you move to the next one. And then this is how you achieve your goals. Let me just clear out the whiteboard. Let me just okay. Go back in the middle. Yeah. So, what came after this though? Why am I talking about this right now? Why did I mention 2 hours ago when I said that there are people online who are into horror who might have not even heard of the second step in this 3-step evolution? What is the third step? Well, it all began in 2019. It all began in 2019 on Tumblr. Yes, the origin of all evil on Earth, with a post. It was just a regular post called. Let me just check the scrolls. Oh no! Oh no! There's everybody. Okay, a guide to exploring abandoned churches. And unlike the previous ones, unlike the Midnight Game, unlike the rules to use a Ouija board, unlike the Midnight Man, One Man Hide and Seek, a guide to exploring abandoned churches is both a piece of creative writing and a list of horror prompts, either horror or at least paranormal. What does this mean? I'm just going to, honestly, I'm doing so much working tonight. Oop. I'm going to pull out the whiteboard. Oop. So I'm just going to list a few of the rules which you can find in a guide to exploring abandoned churches. I'm going to put them on the whiteboard so you can take a look. The link for this one is also going to be in the description, just so you can go and read it yourself. I would advise for those who are into creative writing and are looking for prompts, especially in horror, some kind of occult, fantasy, I would advise you to just go and check it out because it is a truly fascinating piece. But what is a guide to exploring abandoned churches? Again, it is creative writing, definitely. It is fiction, if it can even be called this, because this is not storytelling. And the creator of this piece, this, didn't mean to tell a story. It is a prompt, it is a list of writing prompts. That's all. They didn't share it on a writing platform or a critique platform. They didn't apply for a literary magazine with it. It's not meant to be a story. It's just that. A list of rules, a guide to exploring abandoned churches. And it is quite interesting because this one follows the same structure as the second stage. So we do have quite clear explanation of what would happen if you don't follow those rules, as you can see. Again, this post is from 2019, and some of the rules for those who are just listening and not watching, I'm just going to say some of those suggestions on how not to suffer a lot include: if you go alone, don't bring a flashlight. You might see things you're not meant to. If you find a rosary, don't put it on. It won't help. The cross on the wall changes locations. Don't look at it for too long. If you don't spend the night, leave through the door which you came through. Take whatever you want, but if you find any of your possessions is missing, don't look for it. Let them have it. It's not worth your life. Don't bother trying to be quiet. They know you're there. Mortals mean nothing to them. They never have. You may feel something watching you. Don't turn around. So, those are again quite interesting, mostly because, again, creative writing, you can even see from the way they're formed, from the way they're structured, that it's suggestions. It's a start of something. It's meant to give you inspiration. But quite a lot of people apparently saw this, and if you follow any type of creative Facebook groups, blog posts, Instagram, what are people using nowadays? I have no idea. But you're going to stumble upon this one sooner or later, and you're going to stumble upon it multiple times. It just resurfaces really often. But in 2019, this started a new trend, a new format in horror storytelling. And when I say horror storytelling, I mean it, because up to this point, none of those things have actually been pieces of storytelling. If you remember, the original Bloody Mary, Queen of Spades thing was never actually written down. Those are rituals people performed and then told each other. They didn't write it down because what was the point? The games you're not supposed to play was the same. The actual written part were the recollections of people who say they attempted those. But the rules themselves are not pieces of creative writing. They were never meant to be. They're just there. A guide to exploring abandoned churches, is not a piece of storytelling. It is creative writing. It is very creative. I do adore it, and I do use it when writer block hits. But it's not storytelling. Let me just clear this out. There we go. And just move to a center. And yet, this started the trend of the list of rules horror pieces that claim to be storytelling. What does this mean? All the way from 2019 up to 2 hours ago, as far as I know, this has probably changed. Those literary pieces, those written pieces, have been presented as pieces of storytelling online, mostly on Reddit, And it is, how can I say, it's a very interesting format, which can be a crutch, in which case it's really not good. I'm not here to judge quality today. If you have seen literally any of my other videos, you would know that this is usually what I do, but not today. We're not here to judge anyone's writing skills, but I'm going to say it. In most of those pieces, the list of rules is a crutch. People write the list of rules and try to present them as the actual story. This gets especially messy if they do things for shock value that don't seem to be connected to anything. We mean lists of rules that include don't look at the ghost of little child for some reason. Is there a reason for a ghost of a little child to be there? No. Why are we even talking about it? It's just there for shock value. Or, if the house starts saying your name, don't open the door. Okay, but why would anyone be howling if you are in the middle of a gas station in a busy city at 3 in the morning? There is no reason. Sorry, pet peeves. But my point is that if it's a good story, if the person who wrote it is a good storyteller, the list of rules is, first of all, it's just going to be a part of the story, not the story itself. And you're not even going to notice that it's there. It's going to be clean, concise, and also just a paragraph surrounded by actual storytelling. I have seen a few of those which are quite good. I'm just going to mention them here, and you can try to look for them. I'm not sure if I can find them later, but some of those include a story about a doctor who gets a list of rules related to the burned victim wing, which supposedly doesn't exist. There is one which I quite like, which is the rules a newly hired truck driver gets, and which basically leads you to believe that his usual route goes straight to hell. This is quite well done. And I think one of my favorites is a list of rules a prisoner gets when they wake up in prison without any memory how they got there, and through the story you learn that they're actually in purgatory. They're in hell. No, those are not the same. Sorry, I am not very good with Christianity. But they're in purgatory, and what's common between all of those is that the list of rules is there, but it makes sense in context later why each and every one of those rules is there. And it is linked to the main topic of the piece. It is linked to the road in hell. It is linked to surviving in purgatory. It is linked to the strange and questionable wing of the hospital, which supposedly doesn't exist. Those are not there for shock value. Those are not random things that people think are gross, scary, shocking, or terrifying. They're there for a reason. There was thought put into writing this before it was put out there. And those are good because it is a piece of short horror that was written by someone who put... Okay. It's 3 in the morning and the city is not asleep. Okay. Because if you get a piece of writing and put effort and care into doing it, no matter the format, no matter the theme, it is going to be good. Whether it's horror or something else, it is going to be engaging. It's going to be scary. It's going to influence people. It's going to be good. It's going to be pleasant to read, even if you're scared, because, well, that's why we read horror, don't we? And if you don't put this amount of care into it, if you rely on the equivalent of a jump scare, well, it doesn't matter the format. It doesn't matter the theme. It really doesn't matter. If it's done without care, it's not going to be good. That's it. This was just a bit of a rant regarding the technicalities of actually writing those and treating them as stories, but it's just something I wanted to go over with because it might sound like I don't really enjoy those, which again doesn't matter because this isn't about me enjoying anything. This is about objective storytelling. But the point is, if the horror story would be good, it would be good whether it has this list of rules or not. If the story is not going to be good, a list of rules that tell you that as the night guard of the mortuary, not to open the door when the dead starts scratching on it and calling your name with your dead mother's voice, this is not going to save your story and it's not going to make it more enjoyable. Or, if you're a night guard at the pool and you see a drowned ghost, don't go and talk to them. Okay, great. There is no actual story though. It's just don't talk to the obviously dangerous ghost, which good. I won't. I don't. My point is, if we talk about those pieces from purely technical point of view as pieces of creative writing, because that's what they are, those, for the record, again, I want to make this clear. After anything written after a guide to exploring I can't speak tonight. Anything written after a guide to exploring abandoned churches and uploaded on either r/no sleep, which is the general horror story subreddit. It is quite old, and also the kind of specific subreddit for those, which is called r/rules horror. Sorry, it took me a while. All of those are meant to be pieces of storytelling. They're not prompts, they're not inspiration, they are actual active storytelling. Especially things put on r/no sleep, which with how the rules of the subreddit work, you're supposed to treat those as reality. Those are supposed to be storytelling. And just putting a list of jump scares on paper or on a Word file, I'm not sure if this really is storytelling. But again, okay, let's not focus too much on this, because I can talk all night about what is storytelling, what makes a good story, what makes a bad story, what makes good horror, bad horror, etc., etc. Let's focus on how and why did we get to the point where again, I was on the main page of r/no sleep a few hours ago, like literally a few hours ago, and on the main page in the top 10 posts, which means both recent and also engaging posts, was part 2 of a story, and part 2 was uploaded 2 hours before I looked into it, so it was uploaded today. And part 1 was literally a list of rules. So starting from 2019 up until literally today, those things are still being written, and the number of those pieces is in the hundreds of thousands. So this is a format which is here to stay. But why? Why did it become so popular? I do have some theories. Obviously, I cannot speak about the mindset of every single person who ever wrote this, just because it is a format of a part of a story. So it is not a genre, it's not a subgenre, it's not something which is done by only very specific people. Everyone does it. There's thousands of pieces like this. So I do believe that people just saw it as something which can be added to your story, and that's why it's so popular. What does this mean? Again, good pieces would be good with or without it. Bad pieces are going to be bad with or without it. It's not going to save your story, and it's not going to ruin your story. The list of rules in horror are not going to make a difference. Not really. It's just a paragraph in your story. But if we look at the concept, if we go back to the seances and then go from there, go through the games you're not supposed to play, and then end up in the lists of rules, you would notice that none of those are supposed to be, again, are supposed to be broken. Also, it is 3 in the morning. I picked the wrong time to do this. Well, too late for that. So you would notice that none of those are meant to be broken. We have been following the same format, the same concept for hundreds of years. Actually, if you go all the way back down to the original fairy tales, not the Disney version, the original ones, those were the same thing. And they were warning us against bigger things under the pretense of witches and fairies and the big bad wolf. They were warning us, don't go out at night. It's dangerous. Don't be too proud, because karma. Be a nice person. Be a good person. At least try to be a helpful and kind person. Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Don't don't steal. Don't be too greedy. Those were just lessons to be learned from fairy tales. And then we went to modern times. And our fairy tales took a turn. Because if you think about it, the rules are the fairy tales are still valid. You know, even though our cities are bathed in light, even at night, because if I look out of the window of the attic, this one, if I look at it right now, as you can see, let me just show you. As you can see, it is really, really bright outside, like this. And the reason for this is that even at night, our cities are bathed in light. And yet, the same rules as those from the fairy tales are valid even now. Don't be greedy. Don't take what doesn't belong to you. Be a kind person. Don't walk alone in the middle of the night, maybe, especially not through suspicious neighborhoods or places that are known to be dangerous. And yet, with the way, again, our cities are so brightly lit, with the way people have been taken more and more and more, you have almost forgotten those rules. They're supposedly no longer valid. The big bad wolf doesn't exist anymore because, well, it's really easy to check if the person you're talking to is the person you are looking for. We are trying to keep each other accountable, which is not always a good thing, but it exists. And it might look like the fairy tales are kind of antiques. Just that. A fairy tale. A piece of wisdom that was valid for a time that is no longer here. And yet, we as people kept clinging to horror as a warning. Because even though you tell yourselves that there is nothing to be afraid, Even your fairy tales are declawed, defanged. If you look at all of the modern rendition of the fairy tales, especially the animated ones, the Western ones, all of those are softened. They always have a happy ending. Humans, people, society tells themselves that there is no longer any need for those warnings because society has reached a point where there is no reason to follow those. It is safe enough out there for those rules, for those warnings to be discarded, disregarded, ignored. Because, well, you can't meet the big bad wolf in a forest because, well, most people just don't go into the forest at night, don't they? Do they? They walk through the city where it's bright, it's lit, there's people. Same thing for everything else. And yet, we as creators and people as a whole have kept clinging to those rules to remind yourself that the world is not yours to command, that there is more to it, that there are things there outside of your control. There are things out there which you cannot outsmart, where if you make a mistake, it matters. It's catastrophic. It is the reminder that if you play with fire, it will burn you. And that even though you might be able to heal, to get better, it is going to scar. Oop. What does this mean? What am I trying to say here? Now that you're no longer afraid of the big bad wolf, now that all of those old superstitions are obviously not correct, that there is no fairies that are going to change your child for one of theirs. There is no boogeyman. There is no, again, big bad wolf. There is no reason to be afraid of them. Humanity decided that the warning should still be there, that if it's not those monsters, there has to be new ones, there has to be something else that is used as a warning to remind you that there are bigger things out there. And again, there's people who don't believe in them, which is fine, because all you need is common sense. All of those are just things about common sense, if you really think about it. But I do find it really interesting that the moment some rules are no longer valid, we as creators invent new ones. That once certain warnings are no longer necessary because we have moved past them, suddenly we feel the desperate need to fill the void with new ones. We feel the need to show ourselves, to remind ourselves that not everything is under our control, that things can still happen. That if you're not careful, there is going to be consequences. And that's what the whole point of horror is, I believe. Obviously, if we're talking about the creativity of writing a list, it's just a format. It's just a piece of formatting which is used in some stories. It makes no difference about the quality of it. It's just something you can add. It's a literary trope. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just a device. But if we think about why those lists of rules are so popular, and especially why breaking them is never leading to something good. Because if you think about horror novels, for example, breaking the rules can actually help you defeat the villain. It can help you defeat the vampire, the demon, the serial killer. And yet, in those short stories, breaking the rules is just instant pain, eternal damnation, death. It doesn't lead to anything good. It doesn't build anything, it just destroys you. And it is so interesting that shorter story creators online have chosen to cling to this instead of everything else. Have decided that we as readers, as people, need reminding that the big bad wolf might not be out there, but something is. Even if it's just another person who doesn't have the best intentions, something is out there, and you should be careful. That modern society is not without its dangers, and that once those dangers are no longer real, once they're in the past, once we have moved far enough as individuals, as reality, as a as again, we live in a society. Once you have moved past this, there is going to be something else. It is just this, a reminder that no matter what happens, you're not the ultimate predator. You're not the best or the most powerful or the most dangerous thing on top of the food chain. You need to be careful just like everybody else, because there is always going to be something or someone out there. And it's best we don't forget this. It's just self-preservation, you know? So those were my thoughts, quite rambly, I agree, on this strange phenomenon, why it exists, how it appeared, and what it really means. So, thank you very much for your time. It is now 3:30 in the morning, and I shall see you next time.